My name is Victoria Hart. I'm 20 years old, and the night my phone lit up, my entire life was sold in 3 text messages. The first one popped up while I was finishing an assignment in the campus library. I sold your bed, laptop, desk, everything in your room, to support your cousin. For a second I thought it was a sick joke. Then another text came, calmly explaining, she needs the money to raise her child. Family comes first. My hand started shaking as I stared at the screen. My laptop. The one I'd worked double shifts to pay for. My bed. My desk. The shelves I'd built with my own hands. My entire room, wiped out with a few taps of my mother's thumbs. I typed so fast my fingers hurt. What am I supposed to sleep on when I come home? Where am I supposed to study? Her response was ice cold. If you don't like it, go live in the storage room. From now on, this place belongs to your cousin. My ears rang. I swallowed hard and typed one last message. At least tell me you didn't touch the watch Grandpa left me. I stared at the typing bubbles, praying. It was sold for $300, she replied. No apology, no hesitation. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed my car keys, walked straight past my classmates, and headed for the parking lot. I didn't even feel the cold as I drove. There was only one person who had ever protected me from my mother's family-first excuses, and I was going to him now. 2 hours later, as I sat in my grandfather's driveway, my phone exploded with calls and messages from my mom. What happened? What did you say to him? Before I tell you what my grandfather did, and how one conversation turned my entire family upside down, tell me in the comments what time it is for you right now and where you're watching from. I really want to see how far this story about family, betrayal, and karma can travel. By the time I killed the engine in front of my grandfather's house, my cheeks were stiff from dried tears I couldn't even remember shedding. The porch light was on, casting a warm square of yellow on the front steps, the only place that had ever felt truly safe. I sat there for a few seconds, gripping the steering wheel, replaying those messages in my head like a broken record. I sold your bed. Go live in the storage room. The watch was sold for $300. 3 sentences that told me exactly how much my mother thought I was worth. I forced myself to move. I climbed the steps and knocked twice. The door opened almost immediately, as if he'd been waiting behind it. Tori? He said, using the nickname only he used. Deep lines furrowed his forehead when he saw my face. What's wrong? That one question broke whatever composure I had left. I pushed past him into the hallway, words tumbling out of me before he even had time to close the door. She sold my things, all of it. My bed, my laptop, my desk, everything. And the watch. The watch you left me. She sold that too. He didn't interrupt. He just guided me into the living room, sat me on the couch, and let me pour it all out. I told him about the texts, about the way my mother always said, family first, when she meant your cousin first, about the years of being the backup child, the responsible one, the one who could be sacrificed just this once, over and over again. As I spoke, my mind kept branching out into flickering, vicious little daydreams. In one, I pictured myself marching into my old room with a camera, filming the emptiness, posting the whole thing online. My mom sold my life for $300. In another, I imagined suing her, dragging her into court in front of a judge who would finally say the words I'd been dying to hear. You were wrong. A third version was quieter but darker. Packing my car with whatever scraps I had left, vanishing without a word, and letting her discover what it felt like to be abandoned. It was like a twisted mind map in my head, arrows pointing to revenge, escape, exposure. But I didn't know which one to choose. She said I could live in the storage room like some leftover box. I finished, my voice cracking. And she didn't even ask before selling your watch. My grandfather's eyes hardened in a way I'd rarely seen. "She sold the watch?" he repeated slowly. I nodded, a fresh wave of shame washing over me, as if I'd failed him by not protecting it. I thought it was the one thing she wouldn't touch. He leaned back in his chair, jaw clenched. "I gave that watch to you," he said quietly, more to himself than to me. "Not to her. She had no right." A heavy silence settled between us. Then he asked a question that sliced through my self-pity like a knife. "Tori, why do you think she chose your things instead of her own?" I stared at him, stunned. "Because she doesn't care about me?" I answered automatically. He shook his head. "She cares. Just not the way she should. She chose your things because you're the one she expects to survive it. She thinks you're strong enough to lose everything and still be fine, so you're always the sacrifice." The word sacrificed felt like a stone dropped into my chest. Sacrificed for her cousin's rent, her cousin's baby formula, her cousin's mistakes. "That's not strength," I whispered. "That's being disposable." His gaze sharpened. "Exactly. And that's what needs to change." He stood slowly and walked to a small cabinet against the wall. The one with the locking drawer. I'd grown up knowing it held important papers, but I'd never seen inside. He took out a folder thick with documents and set it on the coffee table. "Your mother has been living in my house and living off my money for years," he said, opening it. I told myself I was helping her get back on her feet, but she never stopped leaning. He flipped through the pages. Bank statements, transfers, checks. My mother's name was everywhere. "I didn't want to drag you into this," he continued, "but selling that watch crossed a line I can't ignore." My throat went dry. "What are you saying?" He looked me straight in the eyes. "I'm saying you're not the one who should be sleeping in a storage room, and I'm done letting your mother treat you like collateral. So we're going to do this differently." He pulled out a second envelope and slid it toward me. Inside was a copy of his will and the deed to the house, with a sticky note in his handwriting. "To be updated. Tomorrow," he said. "You and I are going to my lawyer. I want everything properly documented. In the meantime, we'll confront her together. You're not walking into that house alone." My heart pounded. "She's going to lose it," I whispered. "She always says I'm ungrateful when I bring anything up." "Then let her scream," he replied calmly. "She's been screaming over your life long enough. This time, we're going to speak with facts." He paused. "But I need you to decide something tonight. Do you want to fix the relationship, or do you want to protect yourself even if it means losing it?" That question hung in the air like a weight. I'd never allowed myself to think it out loud, that protecting myself might mean stepping away from my own mother. "Can it be both?" I asked quietly. "We can try," he said. "But from now on, we start with protecting you." As he spoke, my phone buzzed on the table. Another message from my mom. "Why aren't you answering? Your cousin is crying. You're making everything harder." I stared at it, then turned the screen face down. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel obligated to reply. If you were in my place, sitting there with proof that your own mother treated you like a piggy bank, what would you do first? Confront her? Expose her? Or walk away? The next afternoon, we pulled into the driveway of the house I was supposed to call home, though it had started to feel more like a storage unit for everyone else's needs. My grandfather cut the engine and looked at me. "Remember," he said, "you don't have to raise your voice to be strong. Let the facts do that for you." My stomach twisted, but I nodded. We walked up to the front door together. This time, I wasn't the kid trailing behind. I was the one with a folder of screenshots and a witness who actually believed me. When the door swung open, my mother was already there, jaw tight, eyes blazing. She must have been watching from the window. "So you ran to Daddy and tattled?" she snapped, ignoring my grandfather completely. Unbelievable, Victoria. The old me would have flinched at that tone. Now I just stepped aside so my grandfather could walk in first. Jane, he said, his voice cold in a way I'd never heard him use with his own daughter. We need to talk about the things you sold that did not belong to you. She rolled her eyes. Oh, here we go. You're going to take her side now? You know how hard it's been for Savannah. She has a baby. Victoria is an adult. She can replace a bed. I pulled my phone out, my hands surprisingly steady. Can I replace this? I asked, tapping the screen to show her own messages. The list of items, the storage room comment, the line about the watch. She glanced at the phone, then away, like it burned her. You're being dramatic, she said. I told you I'd help you get another laptop when things calm down. You're making this a bigger deal than it is. My grandfather stepped closer. She's not, he said sharply. That watch was not yours to touch. I gave it to her. Selling it was theft, Jane. The word hung in the air like a slap. Theft. For a split second, something flickered in my mother's eyes. Not guilt, but fear. Don't you dare accuse me of that, she hissed. It was in my house. I made a decision for my family. That's what mothers do. Mothers protect their children, my grandfather countered. They don't empty their rooms and call it support, when what they mean is control. A small sound came from the hallway. My cousin appeared, the baby balanced awkwardly on her hip. She looked exhausted, dark circles bruising the skin beneath her eyes. Can we not fight in front of the baby? She murmured, shifting her weight. My mother rounded on her too. See what you've done? She demanded. Now your grandfather thinks I'm some kind of criminal, because she couldn't just be grateful. I stared at Savannah, watching the confusion and guilt war on her face. It hit me that she had probably only heard my mother's version. I made sacrifices for you. Your cousin is being selfish. Did you know she sold my things? I asked quietly. Specifically my watch? Savannah looked at me, then down at the baby. She said you didn't mind helping, she admitted. She told me you said it was just stuff. My laugh came out harsh and humorless. Did she tell you I was supposed to sleep in a storage room when I came home? Silence. My grandfather pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket and placed it on the coffee table. I spoke to my lawyer this morning, he said. We went over everything I've paid for. This house, your utilities, the loans you never repaid. I've been trying to give you a chance. But selling that watch crossed a legal line too. My mother's face paled. You wouldn't, she whispered. You're not going to… What? Call the police? Sue your own daughter? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at me. Do you want me to? The room spun for a second. He was giving me the choice. The part of me that had been screaming for justice wanted to say yes, absolutely. Make her feel what it's like to be powerless. Another part saw my cousin clutching her baby tighter, like the room itself was unsafe. I don't want her in jail, I said finally, my voice rough. I want her to stop treating my life like a savings account she can cash out whenever she wants. My grandfather nodded, then turned back to my mother. Here's what will happen, he said slowly. You will repay the value of the watch and the items you sold. You will stop using my money without my permission. And starting next month, this house will no longer be in your name. You'll pay rent or you'll move. I'm done funding your bad decisions. The words hit harder than any shout. My mother stared at him as if he'd slapped her. You can't do that, she whispered. This is my home. No, he replied softly. It's mine. And you've forgotten that. For the first time, she didn't have a quick comeback. Her jaw worked soundlessly. Then she turned on me, eyes bright with fury and something like betrayal. Look what you've done, she spat. You've turned him against me. Are you happy now? You and your stupid watch? Heat rose in my chest, but I didn't look away. You did this, I said. I just finally stopped pretending it was okay. Behind her, Savannah shifted the baby and took a tiny step closer to me, almost imperceptibly. It was small, but I noticed. My mother noticed too, and her expression darkened. Fine, she snapped. If this is how it's going to be, don't come crying to me when your college bills pile up. I'm done helping you. You were never helping me, I replied quietly. You were managing me. The air crackled. My grandfather cleared his throat. This conversation isn't over, he said. Tomorrow we're all going to sit down with my lawyer, so there are no misunderstandings about money or property. My mother blanched. I'm not going, she said. You can't force me. He simply shrugged. You don't have to, he said. But the paperwork will move forward with or without you. The room felt smaller, the walls pushing in. My mother grabbed her keys, muttering something about needing air, and stormed out, the door slamming so hard the baby flinched and started crying. As Savannah rocked the baby, tears spilling silently down her cheeks, she looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. I didn't know, she whispered, about any of this. You weren't supposed to, I said. That's how she keeps control. By telling each of us only the part that makes her look like the hero. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A new message. From my mother this time, despite her dramatic exit. If you follow through with this, don't ever call me Mom again. I stared at the words, a chill settling over me. Tomorrow, everything would be written down in ink. Who owned what, who owed what, and where I stood in this family. But if you knew that signing those papers might permanently change your relationship with your own mother, would you still go to that meeting? The law office was quieter than I expected. No dramatic banging of gavels, no shouting, just the steady hum of a printer and the scratch of pens against paper. Still, my heart pounded like we were walking into a courtroom. My grandfather, his lawyer, and I sat at one side of the polished table. The empty chair across from us felt like a threat. She might not come, I whispered. She'll think if she ignores it, it'll go away. The lawyer smiled politely, shuffling documents. The paperwork doesn't depend on her attendance, he said, but it's better for everyone if she's here to hear it. 5 minutes before the appointment time, the door opened. My mother walked in, sunglasses on despite being indoors, like she needed a layer between herself and the consequences. She didn't look at me when she sat down. Let's get this over with, she said. I have a baby to help take care of. The lawyer introduced himself and began outlining what my grandfather had already explained to me: the transfer of certain accounts into a trust with my name on it, the adjustment of his will, and the new rental agreement for the house my mother lived in. This is insane, my mother interrupted, her voice rising. You're giving my daughter more control than your own child. My grandfather didn't flinch. I'm giving responsibility to the person who has shown she can handle it, he replied. You've had years to prove the same. The lawyer slid a document toward her. This outlines the repayment plan for the value of the items sold that were not legally yours, he said, including the watch. She picked up the paper, skimmed it, then laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. You want me to pay this back? With what money? Do you think I'm hiding some secret stash? I sold her things because we were desperate. You were desperate, I said quietly. You never asked me what I was willing to give. You just took. Her head snapped toward me. For the first time since she'd walked in, she really looked at me. Not as the ungrateful daughter she complained about to her friends, but as someone sitting across from her at a legal table. Someone with a say. Her bravado began to crack. I'm your mother, she said, voice shaking. I did what I had to do. No, I replied, my own voice trembling now. You did what was easiest for you. You chose the child who couldn't say no yet, and the child you assumed would never say no. I leaned forward slightly. You were wrong about one of them. The lawyer cleared his throat softly and continued, walking us through each clause. With every paragraph, the limitations on her access to my grandfather's accounts, the rental agreement, the written acknowledgement that the watch and certain items were mine, not hers. I watched my mother shrink a little more in her chair. At some point, the sunglasses came off, and I saw the raw panic in her eyes. Dad, she whispered, turning to my grandfather, please don't do this. You're humiliating me. He sighed, and for a moment he didn't look like the unshakable man who had marched into this office. He looked like a tired father who had finally run out of excuses. Jane, he said softly, you did this when you chose to humiliate your own daughter by stripping her room bare without a word. You cared more about appearing generous to one child than being fair to both. Her hands began to shake. You don't understand, she said, her voice cracking. You don't know what it's like to wake up every day and feel like you're failing one child or the other. Savannah calls crying because she can't pay rent, and Victoria sends pictures of her grades and scholarships, and She stopped, choking on her words. I picked the one who needed me more. No, I said softly. You picked the one who made you feel needed. There's a difference. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Tears spilled over, and she pressed her fingers against her eyelids as if she could push them back in. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered. I didn't want to watch Savannah lose everything the way I did when I was her age. My grandfather's expression shifted, some old memory passing behind his eyes. And so you repeated it, he said quietly. You lost everything back then because you had no one to protect you. Now you're making your own daughter lose everything even though she has people willing to protect her. That's not breaking the cycle, Jane. That's repainting it. She stared at the table, shoulders shaking. For a moment, I almost forgot why we were there. She looked small, fragile, like the mom who used to braid my hair in the mornings and leave notes in my lunchbox. But then I remembered the texts, the storage room, the watch. The way she'd turned my pain into a performance about her sacrifices. My sympathy hardened into something sharper, not cruelty, but clarity. This isn't about punishing you, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. It's about making sure it doesn't happen again. To me, or to anyone else you decide is strong enough to lose everything. The lawyer slid a pen across the table. Signing this doesn't make you a bad mother, he said gently. It acknowledges past mistakes and sets boundaries so they aren't repeated. My mother stared at the pen like it was a snake. If I sign this, she whispered, I lose control of everything. I shook my head. No, I said. You lose control of me. There's a difference. The room went silent. After what felt like hours, she picked up the pen with trembling fingers and signed. One signature on a repayment agreement, another on the rental contract, another on a statement acknowledging the watch had been wrongfully sold and that if the buyer could be located, she'd be responsible for buying it back or paying its appraised value into the trust in my name. With each stroke of ink, she looked a little more hollow, like someone who had built her identity on being the provider and was suddenly in free fall. When it was over, she pushed the papers away and stared at me. Are you happy now? She asked, her voice hoarse. You've turned your own mother into the villain in front of everyone. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You did that when you chose to treat me like property, I said. I'm just making sure it's written down so I don't forget what it cost me to finally say no. As we left the office, my grandfather squeezed my shoulder. You did well, he murmured. You stayed calm. I don't feel calm, I admitted. I feel like I just burned a bridge, and I'm standing on the ashes. He nodded. Sometimes that's what it takes to build a road instead. But as we walked to the car, I couldn't help glancing back at the building, wondering, after you put boundaries on paper, Is there any way to go back to being family again? Or does the ink become the line you can never cross? The fallout started quietly. There was no dramatic explosion, no ambulance, no police cars. Just a slow unraveling of the story my mother had told everyone about who we were. Within a week, word got around our extended family that my grandfather had put his own daughter on a lease and put money in his granddaughter's name instead. Of course, the version they heard depended on who told it. My mother said my grandfather had chosen me over her, that I had manipulated him with tears and exaggerations. But my grandfather, for once, didn't stay silent. When relatives called to ask what was going on, he calmly explained the facts: what had been sold, whose name was on which account, and exactly how much money had flowed out over the years. For the first time in my life, the question wasn't, "Why is Victoria being difficult?" It was, "Why didn't anyone stop this earlier?" At home, the atmosphere was different. My mother read every notice from the bank and every email from the rental office with tight lips and shaking hands. For the first month, she managed the new rent. The second month, she started snapping at small things: a dirty dish, a late bill, a crying baby. By the third month, she was sitting at the kitchen table at midnight, staring at a pile of envelopes as if they were written in another language. I didn't live there anymore. After the meeting at the lawyer's office, my grandfather offered me the guest room at his place for as long as you need it, and for once I said yes, instead of insisting I could handle it alone. Still, I came by often, partly to check on my cousin, partly to make sure my mother understood that boundaries didn't mean abandonment. One evening, when I walked in, I found a stranger sitting at the table with them, a woman in her 40s with gentle eyes and a stack of folders. "This is Mara," my grandfather explained. "She's a family financial counselor. I asked her to come by." My mother's eyes flashed. "He thinks I need someone to explain money to me," she said bitterly, gesturing at the papers. Apparently, having a daughter who studies business management wasn't enough. Mara smiled calmly. "I'm not here to judge you," she said. "I'm here to help you figure out how to live within your means, now that certain support has changed." She glanced at me. "And to make sure everyone in this house understands what fair looks like." Over the next hour, we went through numbers. Real numbers, not the vague, "we'll figure it out" my mother liked to use. Rent, utilities, food, baby supplies, debts. My mother bristled at every suggestion that involved cutting back. "I can't just stop helping Savannah," she protested. "She has a baby." "No one is asking you to stop helping," Mara replied gently. "We're asking you to stop helping in ways that require sacrificing someone else's stability without their consent." She turned to me. "Do you feel like your needs have been considered equally in this household?" The question was simple, but it landed like a punch. I looked at my mother, who refused to meet my eyes. "No," I said finally. "I feel like my needs were always negotiable, and my cousins were sacred." For a moment, the only sound in the room was the baby's soft breathing from the bassinet. My mother's face crumpled. "You have no idea how guilty I've felt every time I couldn't help her," she whispered. "Watching her struggle reminds me of being 19 and alone with you, and no one answering their phone when I called." My chest tightened. I'd heard pieces of that story my whole life. The nights she'd gone hungry, the jobs she'd lost, the people who'd turned their backs. But this was the first time she'd connected it directly to what she'd done to me. "So you decided to become the person who always answered her phone," I said quietly. "You just forgot that sometimes." She called at my expense. Mara nodded slowly. "That's a common pattern," she said. "We overcorrect for the pain we went through and end up recreating it in a different direction." She turned to my mother. "But there's another way to show up for your children, one that doesn't require one of them living in poverty of love or resources so the other doesn't." We spent the rest of the session building a practical plan, dividing expenses, setting limits, creating a realistic budget that didn't assume my grandfather's money was an endless backup. For every line we adjusted, my mother argued, then deflated, then scribbled a reluctant initial. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. Consequences had finally arrived, not as a screaming match, but as line items on a spreadsheet that didn't lie. After Mara left, my mother sat quietly for a long time. Finally, she spoke without looking at me. "Do you really think I saw you as disposable?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The old me would have rushed to reassure her. "Of course not, Mom. I know you love me." But love without accountability had gotten us exactly here. "I think you saw me as someone who would always forgive you," I said honestly. "Someone who would always understand and never leave." She swallowed hard. "And now?" "Now," I said, choosing my words carefully, "I still love you. But I won't let you hurt me for the sake of feeling like a good mother to someone else." She flinched, but she didn't argue. That night, as I drove back to my grandfather's house, it hit me that revenge, in my case, didn't look like destroying her life. It looked like forcing her to live within the limits she'd ignored for years. Financial limits, emotional limits, parental limits. It looked like saying no and not backing down when she cried. But I still wondered, can someone who only learned love through sacrifice ever learn to love without having a victim? Months passed. If you'd walked into my life from the outside, you might have thought everything had settled. I lived with my grandfather, commuted to campus, worked part-time at a local design studio, and came home to someone who never once asked me to give up my future for anyone else's emergency. But under the surface, the shift was much bigger. With the little stability I suddenly had, a consistent place to sleep, a desk that wouldn't be sold out from under me, a laptop I'd bought with my own paycheck, my brain finally had room for something other than survival. In one of my classes, a professor assigned a project about financial abuse within families. The topic made my stomach twist, but it also lit something up in me. For the first time, I had language for what I'd grown up calling just helping out. I poured my own story into the project, anonymizing the details. A parent who used family first as a weapon, a grandparent who had silently funded years of bad decisions, a child whose belongings were treated as assets instead of memories. At the last minute, I recorded a voiceover and uploaded the project as an unlisted video, just so my professor could view it easily. Then I forgot about it. Until one night, a notification popped up on my phone. "Your video has been shared 500 times. Somehow, my private project had leaked. Someone had screen recorded it and posted it on a platform I'd barely used. By the end of the week, it had hundreds of thousands of views. Comments flooded in. "This is literally my mom. I thought I was crazy for feeling used by my own family. Please talk more about this." People weren't debating whether I was ungrateful. They were thanking me for naming something they'd been too scared to say out loud. I panicked at first. What if my mother saw it and recognized herself? But as I scrolled through the comments, that fear began to transform into something else, a sense of justice that didn't require screaming matches or legal threats. My story wasn't just about me anymore. It had become a mirror for thousands of people. The next time I visited my mother's house, I noticed the change immediately. The fridge had fewer brand-name items. The living room TV, the one she'd insisted she needed to relax, was gone, replaced by a smaller, older one pulled out of the garage. The fancy coffee subscription she loved had clearly been canceled. Consequences again, this time not enforced by my grandfather, but by math. "You look good," she said stiffly when I walked in, taking in my work clothes and the new bag I'd budgeted for with my own money. "Busy." "I am," I replied. "School, work, a little bit of content." She frowned. "What kind of content?" I hesitated, then decided I was done hiding. I posted a video for one of my classes, I said, about financial abuse in families. It kind of blew up. Her face went still. Is it about me? She asked, voice low. It's about a pattern, I said carefully. About parents who use their kids' things and futures as emergency funds. So yes, she snapped. It's about me. You've told the whole world I'm a monster. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. I never used your name, I said. I changed details. But if you see yourself in it, maybe that says something you don't want to admit. She turned away, her shoulders stiff. Do you know what people will think of me if they find out? Do you know what people thought of me? I countered. When they saw me working extra shifts while my stay-at-home mom always had cash for my cousin's emergencies but not for my textbooks? Silence. Finally, she sank into a chair, looking more tired than I'd ever seen her. Everyone in the family is talking about that video, she muttered. They don't know it's you, but they're piecing things together. Suddenly, everyone's asking me if I've been fair to you. I used to be the one who sacrificed everything for family. Now they're looking at me like I'm selfish. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't hurt so much. For years, she'd crafted a story where she was the noble martyr, the one holding our chaotic little world together. Now people were asking who had paid the price for that narrative. I didn't make you selfish, I said quietly. I just stopped hiding the cost. She pressed her hands to her face. You don't understand what reputation means in a family like ours, she whispered. I worked so hard to look like a good mother. Maybe, I said. You should have worked harder on being one. The words hung in the air like smoke. Harsh, but true. For the first time, she didn't argue. She just sat there, breathing slowly, like someone whose reflection had suddenly changed in a mirror she couldn't smash. That night, back at my grandfather's house, I sent him the link to the video. He watched it in silence, then turned to me with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, he said, for not seeing it sooner, for letting her do so much damage before I stepped in. You're the reason I didn't break, I replied. You and that watch, even if it's gone. He smiled sadly. The watch was just metal and gears, he said. The real inheritance is this. You learned early that your value isn't measured in the things people take from you. As the video continued to spread, people started messaging me, asking for advice, sharing their own stories. I wasn't a therapist, I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew how it felt to be told you were ungrateful for wanting basic respect. So I started answering, one message at a time. Slowly, a community grew around the idea that family doesn't excuse exploitation. It makes it worse. Revenge, I realized, didn't have to be about watching my mother suffer. It could be about making sure what happened to me would be harder for other parents to hide. But I also knew every view of that video, every comment, was another tiny crack in the image my mother had built, and cracks, given enough time, changed the structure underneath. A year after the text that started it all, I walked up the same front steps I'd once climbed as a scared 18-year-old, then as a furious 20-year-old, then as a cautious visitor trying to decide whether hope was still an option. This time, there was a moving truck in the driveway, boxes stacked by the door. My mother stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching two men carry out the last pieces of furniture. The house behind her looked strangely bare, like a stage after the show was over. So it's really happening, I said softly. She didn't jump. She must have heard my car. Rent went up again, she said, her voice flat. Your grandfather warned me it would. I thought I could handle it. I couldn't. Savannah finally found a place closer to her job, so she's moving out too. She let out a bitter little laugh. Guess the storage room is all that's left now. There was no triumph in me, no gloating, just a heavy ache. "Where will you go?" I asked. "A small apartment across town," she replied. "Cheaper. No backyard. No, this place belongs to your cousin's speeches." She glanced at me. "He's putting the house into your trust fully, you know." I nodded. "He told me." "You must be thrilled," she said, but there wasn't much venom in it. Just exhaustion. "It's not about the house," I said. "It's about not watching you burn through everything he gave you and expecting everyone else to pay the smoke damage." She shook her head slowly. "You talk like you're 40, she muttered. "I had to be," I answered. "You skipped that part." We sat on the steps together, the way we used to when I was a kid and she was still figuring things out. For a few minutes, we just watched the movers work. Finally, she spoke. "I watched some of your videos," she said. My heart lurched. "You did?" "I was mad at first," she admitted. "I kept thinking, how could she put our business out there? But then I saw the comments. All those people thanking you, saying they finally had words for what happened to them." She swallowed. "Do you know how many of them sounded exactly like you?" I nodded. "I read them too. It's a lot." "I kept trying to tell myself I wasn't like those parents," she continued, "that I had good reasons, that I was just trying to survive. But the more I listened, the more I realized they all had good reasons too, and their kids were still hurt." She looked down at her hands. "I wanted to be the mother I didn't have. I ended up being the mother I swore I'd never become." The admission didn't erase the years of damage, but it was more honest than anything I'd heard from her in a long time. "Do you want to know the part that hurt the most?" I asked. She nodded, eyes wary. "It wasn't losing my bed or my laptop," I said. "It wasn't even the watch. It was realizing that if I hadn't said anything to Grandpa, you never would have thought you did anything wrong. You would have gone on believing you were the hero of the story." She winced, but she didn't look away. "You're right," she said quietly. "I told myself you were strong, that you'd understand, that you'd forgive me like you always had. I used your strength as permission to be weak where it mattered most." We sat with that for a while. The movers closed the truck, waved, and drove off, leaving the house and its future in a strange silence. "So what now?" she asked finally. "Do I just become one of those tragic comments under your videos? 'Hi, I'm the mom who messed up everything.'" I took a breath. Here was the part where, in most stories, the narrator says something neat and tidy about forgiveness, about fresh starts, about leaving pain in the past. That's not how real life works. "I don't want you to be a tragic comment," I said. "I want you to be the warning that turns into a lesson for other parents and for me." She frowned. "What lesson?" "That love isn't proven through sacrifice alone," I replied. "It's proven through responsibility, through not taking what isn't yours, just because you're scared, through asking instead of assuming, through treating your children as people, not insurance policies." I turned to face her fully. "I'm not going to pretend everything is fine. I'm not going to move back in and act like nothing happened. But I'm also not going to cut you off as long as you respect the boundaries we've set. That's the only way this continues." Tears gathered in her eyes. "Boundaries," she repeated, like it was a foreign word she was trying on for the first time. "You know, in my family growing up, boundaries meant you don't talk about what hurts you." "In mine," I said, "they mean the opposite." She let out a shaky breath. "Then maybe that's your real revenge," she whispered. "Not the trust. Not the videos. The fact that you're going to build a family one day that looks nothing like this." For the first time, the word revenge didn't taste bitter in my mouth. It tasted like possibility. Not destroying what hurt me, but refusing to pass it on. Later that week, I filmed a new video. Not a blow-by-blow of my mother's mistakes, Not a victory lap about legal documents and trust funds. Just me, sitting in my grandfather's kitchen, talking honestly. I told the story of a girl whose room was sold to support family, who thought she was crazy for feeling used because everyone told her she was lucky to have a mother who sacrificed so much. I talked about the difference between help and control, between support and exploitation, between survival and sabotage. And then I said the part I wished someone had told me at 16. You are not ungrateful for wanting your things, your future, and your peace of mind to be yours. You are not selfish for setting boundaries with people who confuse love with ownership, even if those people are your parents. Protecting yourself is not a betrayal of your family, it's a refusal to betray yourself. When I hit post, I didn't check the comments right away. I went outside instead, where my grandfather was watering the small garden he'd kept for years. You're quiet, he observed. You usually ramble after you film. I smiled. It's weird, I said. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm telling a revenge story. What does it feel like then? He asked. A recovery story, I said. A story where the revenge is just refusing to play the same game. He nodded thoughtfully. That, he said, sounds like the kind of story worth telling. Somewhere across town, my mother was unpacking boxes in a smaller apartment, learning what it meant to live without a constant safety net she hadn't earned. My cousin was balancing work and motherhood in a place she'd signed for in her own name. And I was here, finally living a life that wasn't built on the ruins of my own sacrifices. Did my mother change completely? No. People don't rewrite their entire personality in a year. She still slipped sometimes, still said things like, "After all I've done for you," or compared my choices to my cousin's. But each time, I stopped her. Each time, I reminded her, and myself, that love without boundaries isn't love. It's dependency dressed up as devotion. Maybe, in the end, that's the real question this story leaves you with. When your family mistakes your patience for permission, your silence for agreement, and your sacrifices for obligations, how long will you let them write your role before you pick up the pen and start editing the script yourself?